Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 11 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today, as always, as I have been in the last 150 odd episodes. So if you're a regular listener, you may well have come to expect that I am, of course, joined by Principal Cloud Engineer at Logicata, John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
Have I really been doing it that long? Jesus.
Well,
I think I
it's
need
not
to
that
do
long, just that frequently.
Oh, yeah. I need to do the maths on it, right? Because our first season was short because we've done seasons by years just for, somewhere to break it up. And then we've done 40 something, like 42, I think, on average per year since then. So we must be over 160 by now.
Yeah, I've stopped counting now. So there's lots of back catalogue, shall we say? But
yes, and if anyone wants to go and subscribe and download all of them, that's great.
Yeah, it's really good for the stats. Actually, somebody did that last month. It seemed that somebody just logged on to Podbean and downloaded the entire back catalogue. So that's fantastic. I hope they still have storage space left on their phone.
Oh, I mean, the audio ones aren't actually that big. To be honest, they're only a few hundred meg. They're not that big. It's the full 4K video or 1080p, whatever it is we record these in, that's quite chunky. Because when you get to some of our longer episodes, they can easily be a couple of gig that we're uploading. But the audio is not that big.
I didn't look, actually. I have to go and look at the stats and see whether it was audio or video that they downloaded. But anyway, we digress. Let's introduce today's guest. We're delighted to be joined from the other side of the globe by fellow AWS community builder and user group leader, Dimitro Serant. How are you doing today, Dimitro?
Hey, I'm good. Hello from the under the earth.
Down under, down under, as they say. So, what do so we say that you are down under? What do people in Australia say about us in Britain? Keep it polite, obviously, because we are.
I'm not sure. I'm not really talking with a lot of people, and I really like Australia because it's multicultural. And I'm not sure if there are any other place on the earth where you can speak with such terrible accent as I have, and nobody takes care about it. They just doing their best to understand myself. And
I don't know. I can understand you perfectly.
Yeah, fine. I think you're fine. I mean, London's quite like that, to be honest.
Yeah.
But my son, when he's listening how I'm talking, he like, that nobody talks like that. You have a terrible accent. For him, it got much easier to catch the Australian accent because he came to Australia 7 years old, and after 3 years in public school, he just native.
Yeah.
So the Australian accent is 30% swearing, isn't it?
Yeah. And Australia people really love to talk to the strangers, so you can just walk and everyone want to talk with you. And for me, like a person not really social, it was really scary.
Well, you must be a bit social, Dimitro, because as I mentioned, you are a fellow AWS community builder and user group leader. So you can't be a user group leader without talking to at least some people. So tell us a little bit about what you do for the community down under in Australia.
It was my fighting with my imposter syndrome, with all the psychological problems I had. So when I came to Australia, I wasn't able to express myself really. I was really hard to communicate with people, not only because of the language barrier, but also because it's hard for me to start a dialogue with someone. If someone will come to me, start to speak, I can support it, but not really. And when I graduated in Australia, diploma of business, and my teacher did a great job by inviting me to a stage to start public speaking. I was thrilling to visit every community builder meetups, and when I got this opportunity, previous user group leader just stepped over, and I've become the group, and still working on myself. hopefully I will have a chance to speak on the Sydney Summit this year. Applied several presentations. We'll see. It will be my
Have you
next achievement.
submitted a talk?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's quite hard to speak without submitting a talk, unless, of course, your friend of podcast and our user group, Ryan Cormack. Sod. For Dimitro, for context, he was just announced as one of the keynote speakers at the London Summit. So that's public, so we could talk about that.
Yeah, it's quite a lineup. I think there's like the VP of EMEA for AWS, and there is
there's a couple of
Werner
VPs.
Vogels and Ryan Cormack, principal engineer at Motorway. So,
the two key customers appear to be Motorway and Octopus.
Energy,
so they've got a couple of VPs of like head of London and head of data analytics, head of UK and head of something else from AWS, and then Werner's coming over, which is fantastic because we both missed his last ever reInvent speech, keynote, whatever it's called, last year. So it'd be good to see him on stage again. And then you've got the CEO of Octopus, who also has a CBE, right? He's commander of the British Empire, and Ryan, who gets time as well, which I think is really funny, but equally I'm really jealous.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great thing to have on your CV, isn't it? You know, should he ever choose to leave Motorway, then that's obviously a great thing to have on the top of his CV when applying for new jobs.
Hell of a thing for community builder renewal.
Or hero application, perhaps.
Ascension, as you like to call it.
Yeah. So I still have in my wish list this ambassador and maybe hero.
Yep.
I don't think you can be a hero and an ambo at the same time. I don't think that's allowed.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the other. You can be a community builder and a user group lead and an ambo, but you can't be a hero at the same time as an ambo. I think. I might be wrong about that. But the view, as I understand it, is ambassadors are extensions of AWS, and they kind of treat that a little bit separately from the heroes program.
Well, maybe one's a stepping stone to the other, perhaps. But yeah. But yeah, it's good to have these aspirations. Which category community builder are you in, Dimitro?
Containers. I'm a Kubernetes guy.
Okay. Well, sadly, we haven't got any articles about Kubernetes to talk about today. But what do you do for a living? Are you a Kubernetes guy for a living, or is that just your passion in your spare time?
It just because of several of my clients, I'm doing consultancy. I just founded a company and doing my consultancy. And some of the big clients are using Kubernetes because all the startups trying to have serverless architecture. So I'm just looking for a balance.
Fair enough. Well, if it keeps you busy, that's the main thing. That's what you want to be when you're setting up your own business.
Oh, probably the only thing that keeps me busy is AI. On a Sunday evening, I was thinking that, the day comes to the end, and just a few features I will implement on my pet project. And then I realized 1 a.m. in the morning that I'm still doing this AI coding.
You were doing it, or your coding assistant was doing it?
We're doing it both because I did not trust it at all. So I had to confirm every single step and interrupt and say, why are you doing this? Would it be better to do this way?
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up because we do actually have an article about that, but that's the last article we're going to talk about. So let's skip to the first article. As regular listeners to the podcast will know, we're not just here to talk about our community credentials and aspirations. We are here to talk about AWS news. And once a week, I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then John picks a selection of the articles that we like to talk about with our guests. So we have, of course, shared a number of articles with Dimitro. And the first is an announcement that the Database Savings Plans, which were launched at reInvent 2025, to such fanfare that John even wrote a blog post, which he doesn't do that often anymore. But
which is a shame. I like writing, but I don't get a lot of time to do it anymore.
Well, he was so excited about this one that he wrote a blog post about the launch of Database Savings Plans. But this is the announcement that some new products have been announced into the Database Savings Plans framework. So that was one of John's criticisms, I think, in his blog post, that it didn't cover enough of the services. Well, it now covers Amazon OpenSearch Service and Amazon Neptune Analytics. So, John, I don't think these were the ones that you'd identified were glaringly obviously missing from Database Savings Plans, but great to see more things being added already.
Yeah, I mean, OpenSearch, yes, absolutely. You need a way of making OpenSearch cost less money because it's just offensively expensive, right? And you can't blame Elasticsearch for that anymore. I used to blame Elasticsearch because they used to have these, and they still do, to be fair. If you run, Elasticsearch post fork, they have these ridiculous requirements for the size of the kit that they need to be running on. You cannot run it on anything vaguely small. It's got to be massive, and that just costs money, right? Cool, wonderful. OpenSearch, as a result, also because it was forked from Elasticsearch, and it must just be ridiculously inefficient. It's the only thing I can think. I'm sure there's a reason it needs all the power that it needs, but it just costs a lot to run. So a way of saving some money on OpenSearch, fantastic. I don't know if reserved instances for OpenSearch exist or not. I should have checked, but another
Yes,
way, or any other ways of saving money on OpenSearch is good. Neptune Analytics is a funny one, because Neptune, for the uninitiated, is AWS's graph database service. And if you've never used a graph database before, then I envy you, because they're not the nicest things to have to work your head around. But the idea is things like social media and what have you are built on graph databases, because it's not just rows and columns and data and all the rest of it. It's nodes and relationships between them, and you can store information on the nodes or on the relationships, and you walk the graph, as they call it. This is me dusting off my Neo4j knowledge now. You walk the graph as you write a query, and the Cypher query is a bit like, it's more English than SQL. You kind of walk the graph and walk the relationships, and that's all fine. But this is only the analytics piece. It's not Neptune itself. So I find that an odd decision. But yes, as you say, these weren't the things that I specifically called out as obviously missing. What I did call out as obviously missing were, if you look at Elasticsearch, at launch, and to this day, as far as I'm aware, it supports Elasticsearch on the most recent versions, but only if you're using Valkey. If you're using Redis or Memcache, sorry, you're out of luck there. And it was that kind of bizarre decision that I called out, right? And maybe it's understandable, maybe it's not, but Redis is Redis open source. So why you can't offer me some savings on that, I don't know, because you're running the infrastructure, you don't have any licenses to pay. If you're paying a license fee, I'd kind of understand it, but you're not. So why can't I have a savings plan there, please? And things like that. That's what I kind of railed against. And this doesn't fix that. But as I said in the article, and as we've said before, we expect these to expand, and they've expanded it. So they're at least somewhat delivering on the promise.
Just to point out that you meant the Elasticache and not Elasticsearch, because you switched from OpenSearch to Elasticsearch.
Yeah. Whatever. Wrong.
It's early. Yeah, the coffee's probably not kicked in yet.
It's probably not a business, not a technical problem to provide you saving plans on Redis. It might be just a push clients towards Valkey.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't hate that. Right? I don't hate that as a carrot and stick sort of approach. The carrot is Valkey is cheaper to start with, and you can make it even cheaper. And the stick is you have to keep paying for Redis. Sorry. But whilst Valkey is allegedly drop-in replacement for Redis, you're going to find a lot of people that can't or won't do that. Because if you look at third-party vendors, and a few come to mind that I'm not going to name, but they aren't tested with Valkey specifically. And people, even though, it's drop-in replacement, cool. It's not tested. I'm not running my tens of millions or whatever it is through this system that is then running on a piece of untested kit. Even if it should probably work, what the vendor is saying is I need Redis, so I'm going to use Redis. There's a few that are like this. WordPress is very guilty of this sort of thing because they use Redis for caching, and it works really, really well. But in theory, you could just drop Valkey in place, but it's not supported officially. So people don't want to take that risk.
Yeah, but so far it's working. I didn't met any project which is not
so
working.
far.
Yeah, so far. So once they will introduce some breaking changes to the ABI or API, we'll see.
What are your thoughts on the database savings plans, Dimitri? Have you had an experience working with
I
these
like
yet?
it in overall, so it gives more flexibility for the clients who didn't decide yet which database better fits their requirements. And so far, the only advantage of having reserved instances is that saving plan you can have only for 1 year. And with reserved instances and 3 years of commitment, you can have more savings than with the savings plan.
Yeah, I think that's something you highlighted in your blog post, John. There's not as many payment options yet with the database savings plans as there are with reserved instances or compute savings plans.
And there are probably also limitation on the instances type. So the savings plan working only the latest generations of the Graviton instances.
Yeah, exactly. I picked that up as well, right? Because you can only have 1 year no upfront. And okay, I don't hate that because as a business and personally, I recommend those because there's basically no downside to a 1 year no upfront unless you have kind of reasonably firm roadmaps that you're going to be in a certain position for a while. I don't like the fact that it's the most recent versions of things only. And T4 instances didn't count either, right? And I sat there and I said this in my blog, and I'm kind of just pinging myself a little bit here, but we have, and I've seen it before in both our customer base at Logicata and in previous roles that I've had, that you need for global team reasons a 24/7 non-production environment, but you don't need anything bigger than a T4G medium. But sorry, you can't reserve that. You can't have a savings plan for that.
Well, it is a V1 offering, so and we are seeing it.
Is this V1.1?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, well, I don't. It's I was using V1 colloquially, so
it's early days. It's early days still. Yeah,
yeah. So it's good to see the product already evolving within 3 months of it being launched. So. Speaking of products evolving, let's move along to our second article for this week. This is an article on the AWS security blog, all about the new AWS European Sovereign Cloud, which I think launched last month, perhaps. We've spoken about it a couple of times.
About that. We've spoken about it a lot because there was a lot of news about it. And because we're in Europe, we sort of talk about these things. We're not in the EU. For anyone that comes at me, Europe and the EU are different. I know.
Well, so this is the announcement.
I hope one day it will come also to Australia as one of the Commonwealth countries.
The European Sovereign Cloud. Well, that would be a bit of an extension.
Commonwealth Cloud.
So, Commonwealth Cloud.
Well, wasn't Canada talking about joining? Wasn't Canada talking about joining the European Union at one point? I think so. You never know.
There's noises about CanZuck now, as it's sort of called. Canada. New Zealand, Australia, and the UK in some sort of free trade agreement, which has got just a CanZuck, which is okay. Who came up with that? Which I wouldn't mind because visa-free travel to Canada or Australia. I wouldn't mind that.
Still won't be free though, will it? Just visa-free.
No, the plane is still going to cost you a shed load of money.
Anyway, back on track. So this is the announcement. The European Sovereign Cloud has achieved its first compliance milestones, SOC 2 and C5 reports, plus 7 ISO certs. So compliance obviously is paramount when you are in the data center cloud hosting business, because without it, it precludes you from dealing with lots of organizations who require these compliance certifications. So I'm surprised that it went into GA without these, to be honest, that these didn't come first. But I guess you've got to be operating to get them because they're auditing your operations. So what are your thoughts on this, John?
That it's all incredibly dull, and I was equally surprised that they didn't do these before going live with it. But as you say, it's one of those, you've got to be operating to hit the targets. So okay, maybe they could have operated in a private release before doing it to get the certs ahead of time. I don't know. The fact that they've gone and got them as an independent body kind of shows, and I'm still a skeptic. I'm always a skeptic. That's just how I'm wired. But it kind of shows to me that they are still operating on the basis that it's an independent entity and they haven't inherited these from AWS proper. So they're operating independently. They've got their own certs, which is good. I'm not familiar with all of the certs. SOC 2 I know about, but I've always thought of that as something similar to ISO 27001. So I don't quite understand why they've got both, but maybe people want both. I don't know. Maybe certain Europeans like SOC 2 rather than the ISO standards. C5 is a German one, which kind of makes sense. It's based in Germany. And then the ISO standards, 27001, which is security management. And then there's a bunch of cloud stuff. And they've done 9001 as well, because why not? If you're doing all the rest of them, do 9001 too, apparently, for quality management. Cool. If you need them, and this is a thing generally, this is not a European sovereign cloud specific thing. If you need to go and download certifications and reports and what have you from AWS, it's in AWS Artifact inside the console. And this is the same for sovereign cloud or normal cloud. So if you need to provide those, you can just go download them. You don't have to kind of ask a TAM or anything silly like that.
Yep. So I was just having a look at some of the other ones. There's service management. There is business continuity management, which of course makes a lot of sense. What's this one? The privacy information management systems. Not sure how that differs to information security, but it is a different standard.
Personal data, maybe? I don't know.
Possibly, yeah. Well, no, because there's another one that does that, which is the 27018. So, which is based on PII, I think. Although PII is covered in ISO as well. So I'm not sure what the specific nuances of these are, but obviously it's great that if you do want to operate in the European Sovereign Cloud, they do now have their own standalone versions of these standard certifications. Obviously, AWS already had all of these anyway for all of their other data centers. Just on the subject of SOC 2 versus ISO 27001, I think they are largely or broadly similar, but SOC 2 tends to be more adopted in the US and ISO 27001 in Europe and the rest of the world, but they broadly cover the same things.
Yeah, so why would the European Sovereign Cloud need the US standard?
Because maybe there are US customers that want to operate in the European Sovereign Cloud for reasons that their customers, perhaps, I don't know.
US businesses with EU offshoots, that happens quite a lot. Which you do hear some very funny stories of new American managers saying, "Why are you taking holiday?" "I'm in France. Of course I'm taking holiday."
What are your thoughts on this?
I'm just guessing that this delay they had with introducing certifications just because of how these certifications working. So usually you have to provide evidences that you following the rules you set up in your company. You are compliant with them. And if you didn't have any workload running in the cloud, how would you show that you're following all the procedures? So maybe they had to have some time like running operations. So then the QSA can come, check everything, they provide evidences, and it's starting to work. And
I think you're right about that, Dimitro. And I think what a lot of companies do in this scenario, if they're trading and they've got customers who want these standards, they just say we are working towards, and if they know they've got an audit date coming up, etc., they'll say we are aligned with and we are operating in accordance with these standards, and we're working towards certification, and we will be audited on X date, and hopefully we will pass the audit.
It's not the worst case when someone is really working on. It's much worse when someone just tick, got certification, we're compliant. And there are nothing underneath. So,
no processes and procedures. But what are your thoughts on the European Sovereign Cloud in general? I mean, obviously you're in Australia, so it's probably less.
I didn't play with it, so I had never had the chance to play with the How Cloud in USA, with China cloud, and with this sovereign cloud. So maybe when one of the clients will be ready to move in, I will have a chance to see if my all AMI policies compliant have this placeholder for sovereign cloud.
And Sovereign Cloud and GovCloud are a bit funny, aren't they? Because they sit in different namespaces, so you can't switch to them in the console. You've got to kind of log out and back in again, and it lives completely separately.
Yeah, so there is some nuances.
Is there a drive for Sovereign Cloud in Australia, do you think? Will we see announcements of Sovereign Cloud Australia in the future?
No, we were happy to have 2 years ago a second region. So finally we can have regional redundancy in Australia. Yeah, because when you have data center only in Sydney, it's hard to achieve. But now we have also in Melbourne, and maybe there are a lot of talks about data, how it calls residency.
Mm.
So every country tries to keep their data under the control.
Yeah.
I'm having to kind of eat my words a little bit on this one because, excuse me, because for a long time I was going data residency, who cares, right? So long as it's kept to the same standards, and this is what the GDPR was going on about, was it didn't have to be stored in country of origin, it just had to be stored under the same security standards. So you could put it in, back when we were in the EU, don't come for me, you could put it in London or Frankfurt or France or Stockholm or kind of, where, so long as it had the same data security standards, that was okay. That was allowed. And I was going, well, that's going to be enough for anybody. Surely, what are you going on about? Unless you're in some sort of massively regulated industry. And I come from a finance background, so that kind of makes sense. You don't need this. And now the world and their mum is saying, oh, we want to keep our data on our own shores and data residency, this, that, and the other. And okay, that's the way the regulation's going. I still disagree that it's correct, personally. I understand it, but it all feels a bit knee-jerk fear-mongery to me.
Mm. Well, and I always come back to the point that if it's properly encrypted, what does it matter where it is? Because, even if it becomes a subject of an access request, then if it's properly encrypted, nobody will be able to read it anyway, other than you, who has the keys. So they're going to have to come and ask you for the keys if they want to access your data. But
if you have a good budget, you can play with AWS Bracket, or how it calls this quantum
service, yeah.
yeah, and check the encryption.
Well, yeah, there is that. Yeah, there is that. But you would definitely need a good budget for that.
I've seen some scary numbers about that, actually. Just in quantum encryption versus regular encryption. If you throw a normal 256-bit AES at a quantum thing that, normal computers would take years to break, a quantum will do it in about 10 minutes. Like, boof. Whoa! Okay, scary.
Yeah, and when I started, why should I care what happens in 5 years? And then I realized that people already collecting all the traffic and then can decrypt it later. So something what is not decryptable right now can be just collected for a while and then gone public.
Interesting. I never thought about it from that perspective. And
it's the same concept of cryogenic freezing, isn't it? Is we can freeze the people, but we can't thaw them out. But maybe in 100 years, you could thaw them out.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely a digression from the topic. So let's move on to our next article. This is about managing life cycles. So I suppose it's not too much of a digression, but not managing life cycles of frozen corpses. This is an article on the AWS security blog about how to manage the life cycle of Amazon machine images. Not quite as exciting, using AMI Lineage for AWS. So I'd never heard of AMI Lineage before reading this article. But John, have you heard of AMI Lineage? For managing?
Not before reading this article, but the concept is pretty similar, right, to something that I'm familiar with before. So the idea, and this is something you deploy yourself, okay? This is not something out of the box, and I find that quite frustrating. But the idea is when you are building machine images, by and large, you're building them on top of a pre-existing one, okay? You are not hand-rolling a Linux kernel. You're just not doing that. And you are not necessarily importing something from, I don't know, a VDI or a VMware disk image, which I think is a VDI, or a Vagrant template or whatever. You're not importing those things, okay? If you look at Packer, if you look at EC2 Image Builder, you start with a base image. You start with Ubuntu Daily or Amazon Linux Daily or whatever. You do things to it, and then you publish it. Or you submit it, you publish it, you do whatever you need to do with it. Cool. And then in turn, you can build on that and build on that and build on that, right? And the idea is after a few iterations of that and a few kind of runs down the chain, it becomes very hard to work out where these images have actually come from to begin with, right? And let me give you an example. It's slightly fictitious, but slightly realistic because it's something I've built before. You take daily image, do hardening, cool. That is in the daily image for the platform team. Platform team does stuff to it, and they install Circle CD, Circle CI, Go CD. They install these various other things on it. They install such and such and such and such. And that then becomes either their tooling, or because they've then gone, cool, that's the hardened image that we've now got, and we're going to install a bunch of standard packages. Wonderful. That's then the app teams things. And then they do things with that, right? And this is really common in big enterprises because they've got platform teams, they've got security teams, they've got all of these separate teams. They don't just have a John or, a Dimitro. They've got more than that. They've got teams of these people doing things. And if you need to see a chain of custody, as they call it, which is a bit of, it's a kind of a legal term, because you talk about chain of evidence, chain of custody, making sure that things are owned by people and documented and all the way through. That's impossible unless you're tracking it through some sort of tracking tool, right? No one on their right mind is going to do that manually because it's impossible. And AMIs will tell you the one that they're built on top of, right? They hang on to that information themselves, but that's as far as they go. They go one turtle back up, but that's it. What this is doing, and it's a solution that you have to deploy, and it is hideously complicated, is it tracks the whole thing through for you, which is really useful if you need that, but most people don't. I just think it's really interesting.
Dimitro, do you think it's interesting?
I'm just surprised what people just inventing to not work with Kubernetes and images. With images, you have layers, you can assign the complete image or layer and have all of these out of the box without any problems. I'm trying to avoid playing with AMI because for me, Carpenter will spin up the most recent BottleRock AMI, which is secured by default, has read-only base system, and I do not make any changes to it. I'm working only on the second layer of abstraction on level of the images, Kubernetes level. But nice to know. I didn't hear about this either before with the article.
Yeah, I mean, it came out at the end of 2024, so maybe this blog post is a bit late. Maybe it's not being adopted in the way that AWS thought it might be, because it's a good sort of year and a half after the product launch. But normally these things come out around about the same time as the product launch to drive the adoption. But there we go. If you have lots of AMIs and you need to know which turtle they came from, apparently, according to John, then this is the tool for that. So
go enough turtles down, it's bash anyway.
Right, let's move along to our fourth article for this week, and back on the subject of space. We've been talking about space quite a bit on the podcast recently because of all this satellite activity that's going on, satellite broadband, data centers in space on satellites. This is an article on the Register last week where apparently Amazon have told the FCC to bin SpaceX's million satellite data center dream. That seems like an awful lot of satellites. I don't know how close a million satellites would have to be together. Is it going to get very dark if they launch a million satellites? Is it going to block the sun out? Or,
no.
It seems like a lot, though.
You're thinking Sparta and Persian arrows is what you're thinking there.
I'm just trying to conceptualize what a million satellites looks like. But
it looks like a lot of money is what it looks like.
It looks like a lot of rockets pumping a lot of, gas into the atmosphere to get them up into space, I would have thought. But
don't start me on orbital launch slings. Don't start me on them.
Well, let's start on something else then. So I was not aware of space. Obviously, we've spoken about the whole satellite data center thing, but I wasn't aware that SpaceX was trying to get a million of these things up there. So what are your thoughts on this, John?
Let's ignore the whole Elon Musk SpaceX noise for the minute, okay? This is very much a standard Amazon reaction to other people doing something that they want to do. Is other company comes along, says, we're going to do this. Amazon goes, well, that was in our pipeline already. Hang on. Regulator, they can't do that.
Yeah.
That's quite a normal Amazonian reaction. And I like AWS. I like the company. I like the tools, all the rest of it. This is a very horrible reaction from them, I think. Yes, as they call it, a speculative plan and so on and so on. I'm sorry, that's just the way SpaceX operates, right? Elon, I'm not a personal fan of the man, but he promises the moon on a stick, delivers half of a stick most of the time. That's how the man works, right? But half of a stick is more than anyone else has put out in terms of the thing that they end up talking about. And then the market catches up. Cool. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the way that SpaceX tends to work, the way that man tends to operate, right? Overpromise, underdeliver, but you've underdelivered something that no one else had delivered anything on anyway, so it kind of didn't matter. Cool. In terms of what they're trying to do, 1 million satellites in low Earth orbit, it's not a problem for solar, like my solar panels are not going to notice 1 million satellites in low Earth orbit. Astronomers are going to be terribly unhappy because that will have actual impacts over long exposure photography and what have you, but they're unhappy about lots of things. So don't know how much I care about that. Apparently we should care because secrets of the universe and the history of where we all came from and all this malarkey, but I don't think 1 million is necessarily a problem. As you say, the challenge is we currently got, according to the article, around about 15,000 in orbit in general. It doesn't talk about the sort of orbit, but 1 million in low Earth orbit is going to take a lot of rockets or a lot of energy to put up into space. What I find quite interesting is the claims in the filing also talk about it being the first step towards becoming a type 2 civilization on the Kardashev scale. And that's not something I ever thought I'd read on the register. For those unfamiliar, the Kardashev scale is a bit sci-fi, but it talks about how much a civilization can use of the energy available to it within certain parameters. A type 1 is all of the energy coming from outside of the planet to the planet. Yeah, we are apparently about 0.7 at the moment of what we could possibly do. We're about 0.7. So talking about going to a type 2, which is all of the power from the local star, right? And then you talk about Dyson spheres, and it all gets very sci-fi and very Star Trek. But maybe let's focus on being a type 1 before we worry about type 2s. Let's stop burning dinosaurs for power, perhaps.
Yeah, and for me, it's interesting how they bring so the idea is if you have these satellites on the orbit, you have unlimited power from the sun. You are using more effectively solar panels. But there is another problem. How they going to cool it down? All electronics generates a huge amount of heat when it's working, and there are no way to where you will pass this heat to the void.
Yeah,
And
so the problem
it's the second theorem, or how it. I'm not very familiar in this terminology. I've used to study it back in school, in my language. So I'm just had no time to check with ChatGPT or other AI to explain me how is it possible at all.
Yeah, so currently you're not wrong, right? Because satellites at the minute, they do have cooling problems. And I've spoken about this on the podcast before because I'm a massive science nerd and I'm a massive space nerd, just generally. Currently, the backs of the solar panels are used as massive radiators, but you're not wrong because you need to be able to radiate heat to something, right? And there's not a whole heap of stuff up in space. Okay, you can radiate it into a vacuum, and that actually kind of works. And space isn't a true vacuum because a true vacuum doesn't exist in nature. It just doesn't, right? Space isn't a true vacuum. It's just near to one. But yes, if you're going to put a decent sized, power hungry, heat generating thing on a satellite, you're going to need vast amounts of radiators. If you look at the ISS as a good example, they've got more radiators than solar panels. Well, that just kind of shows you the scale of the problem.
But it's not just typical radiators. They
No,
must
they're specialized,
evaporate
highly
something.
specialized.
They need to evaporate something. They need to pass this energy to the outside. And in that case, you will need what? Water? Or
I've got this brilliant image in my head of we've got these million satellites in a low Earth constellation, and then you've got lots of other little satellites going around filling their water tanks back up.
okay, we'll see.
Well, I'm sure they're thinking about that, but I think Amazon's point here with their filing to the FCC is they're not thinking about it enough because the application seems to be purely aspirational without any real detail behind how this is actually going to happen. And therefore, Amazon's claim is that it is just a placeholder without any real substance behind it. So
Well,
I think they
it
probably
kind
have
of
a point.
it kind of makes sense to do that to the FCC though, because the FCC doesn't care about space; they care about the communications bandwidths and airways and things. So the FCC filing doesn't need to say how they're cooling the satellites; it needs to say what frequencies they're going to use.
Yep. Well, maybe it didn't include that either. I haven't read it, I have to say, but
I wouldn't read FCC filings personally. I wouldn't do it to yourself.
yeah. Well, you could probably get AI to read it for you and give you a nice summary. Yeah. Speaking of which, yeah, exactly. Nice segue to our final topic this week, which Dimitri was so keen to talk about. He started talking about it at the start of the podcast, but we can talk about it again now. So this is another Register article, and this is all about the meeting that Amazon held last week, which seemed to be a bit of a panic reaction to increasing levels of downtime or outages on Amazon.com. Not so much about AWS. This is more about Amazon.com, which has been experiencing a number of problems recently, and the press love a bit of a chink in anyone's armor, so they seem to be pointing to the fact that this could well be to do with rapid adoption of AI coding assistants in Amazon, which of course AWS are going to want to point out is not the case, because they are furiously peddling AI and AI coding assistants, and the world is rapidly adopting these things. The press is speculating that this meeting that was held in Amazon last week was all about potentially slowing down the adoption of AI coding assistants due to the problems that they are potentially causing. So, John, what are your thoughts on this? I know you are rapidly adopting AI coding assistants yourself. What's your view on this?
It's a trust issue fundamentally, right? I'm rapidly adopting an AI coding assistant because you only pay for one, but that's fine. I only need for one. I don't need several. So the one is fine. And people that I talk to, people at the user group, people kind of in the community builders program, again, they're talking about, XYZ coding assistant is doing 150% of my work for me. I mean, 150% because I'm doing more work than I was before due to coding assistant, right? No one in their right mind is giving it direct access to production, in the same way that you don't give an intern access to production. You don't give a junior dev access to production unless it's gone through several quality gates, peer reviews, and all the rest of it. So why is this news? I think, as you say, it's a little bit sensationalist. The challenge, as we're discovering internally, is you are able to, in proof of concepts and what have you, iterate so rapidly and put out so much code that your traditional review process can't keep up anymore. So things that had a review process aren't being properly reviewed because in 2 days you put out 5,000 lines of a new proof of concept. It's like, I don't even know what this is. What's this supposed to be doing? Someone help me. And then you've got to go and spend another couple of days redocumented everything that you kind of iterated on. And I think that is part of the challenge here. It's not necessarily that AI is the problem. It's that our processes are not designed to cope with the amount that AI can put out. I do think this is a bit sensationalist, but that's kind of the way of the media these days. But I think that's really the problem, is we just haven't got the mechanisms to cope with the amount of code that AI is putting out without using other AI and then really relying on that.
So I know you were talking about this at the start of the podcast, Dimitri, but what are your thoughts on this specific issue? Do you think it's the AI coding assistants causing this? What do you think's behind this? Or is it just the press sensationalizing things?
I just thought about all this stuff, how it's working with our SDLC lifecycle. And before, developers were probably the bottleneck when you're working on your project, on your application software. And with coding assistance, it's not a bottleneck anymore. And as John says, it's more like reviewers who need to understand all the changes on the code. When I used to write the code and type it and think about it, it could be days. And it goes in my mind. It's not like one-time process. It's moving forth and backwards, and I have enough time to imagine all the edge cases or consequences of my changes, and I can predict what's going to happen, and I better understand the system. Right now, I can oversee the big picture and just press yes, yes, yes in the best case. If I have this approval step, I have this human in the loop, not getting it off like YOLO mode and just write something for me and deploy. So yeah, it's we will need to somehow find how to have these guardrails, and there are nothing more as having another AI on top of it who will perform review, because people are not able to review in the space and the pace which business requires from us.
No, not when we keep getting rid of the people, because AI can do the jobs. Yeah, it is a challenge. I'm sure it's a challenge which is being addressed by many an AI startup right now. But
there's a couple that I'm aware of. But the challenge is it's then trust, right? Because you're making things with AI and then reviewing things with AI, and no one's really got any kind of big picture context in their heads.
And then you blame AI.
Exactly. Yeah. But it was the humans that made that decision in the first place. But
engineers are inherently lazy. Let's be honest. Engineers are inherently lazy. If I can get a machine to do my job for me, I'm going to do that.
Fair enough. Just need to make sure the machine can do it properly.
It does the work most of the time and does it good, you just starting to trust. And maybe AI does it already consciously. Like,
not sure we're there yet, but we're probably not that far away with the rate that things are developing. But on that note, we have reached the end of our time for Season 5, Episode 11 of Logicast. So it just remains for me to thank you, Dmitro, for joining us from down under in what is your evening and our morning. Always amazes me that we can do these things. Isn't the internet amazing? Yeah, really great to hear your insights on this week's AWS news. John, great, as always, to hear your insights, even if you did call Elasticache Elasticsearch. Easily done. They're very similar.
I do need to do the revision for the DevOps Pro renewal. I really do.
Yeah, well, I'm sure as long as you don't do the exam at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, I'm sure you'll be fine.
No, I tend to do them at about 10 o'clock because then all the traffic's gone and I've done all my morning and I just go to the test center.
And the caffeine is kicked in.
Yeah.
I just realized that I did not have this 16 certificate. For some reason, I have 15 active with all this that were deprecated but not yet expired. And I have this AI one, which is in a bit better, but I didn't prepare for it yet. So.
Well, yeah, so you're going for the gold jacket. You're almost at gold jacket level.
I have a gold jacket for 15th, but
you do?
Another one, so I can't have this 16 certificate.
Can't wear it. You can't wear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Guys, thank you for having me, and it was nice to chat with you.
Likewise. So thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, as always, if you've enjoyed it, please give us a like, a rating. Please do tell your friends. We are available to download from wherever you download your podcasts. And of course, we are available to stream on the Logicata YouTube channel as well. So thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, see you again next time.
Yeah.